Welcome back, ladies. Thank you so very much for tuning back into the Aligned Mommas podcast. We are so excited today. We have a very special guest, Dr. Shiloh. She is here with us. She is here to discuss the topic of ADHD in children. It was a few months ago that there was a post about ADHD, and I think a mom in the Aligned Mommas
community.
Me. Was it you?
It was me.
Oh. Okay.
Hi, I am she.
Samantha posted something about ADHD in children, and then there was so much engagement. As you all know, listening as we know, I mean, there's so many people that are going through this with their children. And so every mom out there is like, hey, if you guys know of a tip, let me know. And so somebody tagged you in the post, Dr. Shiloh, and you started feeding advice. And something that caught my eye about you, it was not just like, hey, try this pharmaceutical drug, which are necessary, but you were saying something about some vitamins or some other things too. And I'm like, oh, that just like established so much credibility with me just by how you responded. And so I messaged her a couple times like, hey, you want to do a podcast? Hey, I think there's so much engagement on this. We really need to shed light if you're willing. And she said yes. So she's here with us today. She's going to give a brief introduction, maybe talk about how she fell into this position, and then also give her top tips for being a parent of a child with ADHD. So with that, if you want to kick it off with an intro.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Dr. Shiloh Werkmeister. I am the owner of Integrative Connections Counseling Wellness Center on Main Street in Troy. And I am a psychotherapist, but also an integrative medicine provider, meaning that I don't lean into prescribing pharmaceuticals. I lean into looking at natural, holistic ways to help the body. That can range from exercise to diet to supplementation to essential oils. I believe that we have a big toolbox of things that have been provided to us that we can use to help heal the body and help the body function as it's intended to. And I don't think we have to just always jump straight into prescription medicines in order to do that.
You're speaking our language.
Well, for me, the reason I've come to believe that is very personal. So my backstory is I did not start out with an intention of going into psychology and going into mental health. I started out in business. I was actually in banking. I grew up in Troy. My family has a long history of banking, and my grandfather and my father were both presidents of People's Bank over the years. And so I grew up with just finances as this is what we do. And I was really...
Sounds like so much fun.
I was really committed. I had, gone to school and was getting my MBA and was focused on a career in banking. And then I ended up having a shift where I started having headaches that were insane headaches that I went to doctor after doctor after doctor for a span of about 3 years. And they kept just saying, it's migraines. And I said, no, I have had migraines before. This is not a migraine. They tried every medication that they knew, and none of it was touching anything and making the pain any better.
How often were you having them?
Daily.
Wow.
Daily. And then they got to the point where they were just debilitating and I couldn't function at all. I was vomiting constantly from the pain. Even got to the point where I started having seizures.
Oh, wow.
And no matter what tests we ran or medications we tried, it wasn't helping. And after 3 years of going to doctor after doctor, I was getting so frustrated with the process because I just felt like I was not being heard or taken seriously. And because they had exhausted all of their resources, they started to tell me it's just anxiety.
Oh my.
And they wanted to put me on anxiety medication rather than treat the actual problem. And I said, this is not anxiety. I said, you're seeing that I'm stressed, but I'm stressed because I'm in pain. Mm-hmm. And you're not helping my pain. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the last step in this train of years of seeking help was a doctor said, I'm sending you to a neuro-ophthalmologist. We've done everything else. Let's check your eyes. So I went and I had my appointment, and the neuro-ophthalmologist said, there's something pressing on your optic nerve. I want you to go get an MRI. And so he sent me straight over to get that done. And I remember it very clearly because it was on my daughter's second birthday. They called me with the results and said, you have a brain tumor.
Oh my gosh.
That is pressing on your optic nerve, and that is what's causing all of this pain and all of these issues that you've been having. We want you to go straight to neurosurgery. So the very next day, I was in the neurosurgeon's office, and they were talking about doing surgery to remove this tumor. And they tried to shrink the tumor first because they didn't want to just go in and yank it out. But it kept growing and it kept causing problem. Yes. But what happened was I lost my vision. I went from seeing everything normally to seeing in kind of like a murky, like you're
Both
underwater.
eyes or one eye?
Both.
Wow.
Like it was like you're swimming in a muddy lake or a pond. Then it went to black and white, and I will never forget the day I was making dinner, stirring the spaghetti, and my son said, hey, can you help me with this math problem? And I turned around, and I had this spoon in my hand, and as I turned, the lights just went out, and everything went dark. Couldn't see at all.
So scary.
And that was when they finally said, we need to take this tumor out because this could be permanent if we don't. Mm-hmm. I remember going into surgery and the doctor saying, you're going to have a 20% chance of coming out of this and just being alive. And my family was just surrounding me. I grew up in a very God-loving home, and my family was surrounding me. And I remember the last thing before they knocked me out before surgery was my dad just praying over me. Mm-hmm. And I went into that surgery just feeling absolute peace, knowing it was God who was in control, and I couldn't control any of it, and I didn't have a control over the outcome. And then when I woke up, we just rejoiced that I woke up because you don't expect to have that. You could be gone, and then what happens to everybody else when you do? So I started the road to recovery, and started off doing pretty well, but then slowly some of the symptoms just kept coming back. The headaches, the seizures, and they couldn't figure it out for a while, but then they figured out that where the tumor had sat, there was a pocket of cerebral spinal fluid that just kept overfilling. And so they call it pseudotumor cerebri, where your brain thinks the tumor is still there because of the intracranial pressure. So then I had to have another surgery to implant a shunt into my brain to drain the excess cerebral spinal fluid off so that I could function again. Oh my gosh. And so we did that, and then there was another recovery process. Learned a couple of things through that process. One,
my golly, I bet you learned so much. It probably transformed your life.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing I learned is that it's really important when you go through super crisis moments to maintain your sense of humor.
It's good.
My kids thought it was hilarious when I couldn't see. They'd like to rearrange the furniture, especially my boys, to watch me trip, and I just hear them chuckle.
Gosh, that'd be my kids.
Because they were like early teens at that point, so they thought it was hilarious
and horrible all in one.
Yeah. So we just laughed a lot.
I love
and then the second thing I learned is I look really horrible bald. I look just like my father. It's very disturbing. And I also really learned to just be present in the moment because you don't know what could happen. And so you learn to really start to be very in the moment, mindful, focused, because you don't get a guarantee of tomorrow. None of us do. The only guarantee we have is that we know where we're going because we have put our faith in Jesus. So
I love you so much. Like, I'm so thankful to God that he like just
Yeah.
brought you here because we knew very little about your story. Our team that vets our podcast guests is not existent yet. So we sometimes just like roll with the punches, but I'm so inspired already.
So for me, after I went through a little season of healing, I had to make a choice of, do I go back to my normal life or what's next? And unfortunately, when they went in to do surgery, they had to go through the part of the brain that actually controls math functioning. And I lost the ability to do math.
Those guys being like, nope.
So you can't be a banker and not be able to do math.
Oh, that's so funny.
I'll just go be a doctor instead.
Yeah.
So I was, left at this crossroads of, okay, what direction am I supposed to go in? And it occurred to me, I wouldn't have been able to get through everything I had gone through if I didn't have my support system that helped me. And I thought, well, what about the people who don't have that? And it just really felt like a calling on me that I wanted to be able to provide that to other people. So I started exploring ways that I could do that and ended up deciding I wanted to go into mental health. So I went back to school, started at nothing, got a bachelor's degree in behavioral science.
How old were you when you restarted?
32.
Wow.
Wow.
Yep.
It's impressive.
So I was at 32, started with nothing, got a behavioral science degree, and then I got a master's degree in counseling after that. This is all while I'm raising kids, so you can do it if that's something God wants you to do.
Wasn't easy, I'm sure.
You can do it. My kids knew that if mom was studying, they needed to wait because I could only process so much at a time. But we made it work. And then eventually went on to get my doctorate in health professional education. And now I am an integrative medicine provider on top of being a psychotherapist. And I teach doctors about mental health.
Amazing.
I teach at Logan University and teach future chiropractors about mental health so that they'll be able to better serve their patients as well. I teach for MOBAP as well. So that's been my journey as far as education. Obviously, after I got out of school, I decided I wanted to have a private practice, and I wanted to bring it back to my hometown where I grew up, because I was raised with the philosophy that you give back to the community that helps to create who you are. It was, my family is very philanthropic, and it was something that we were just really encouraged to do growing up. So I always knew I wanted to have a private practice in town, and started off small, and then over the years have been fortunate enough to build it up. And now I have an entire wellness clinic focused on mental health, but from a whole body perspective, because I don't believe we just feel our emotions in our brain. We feel them in our whole body. Mm-hmm. If you have anxiety or stress or depression, trauma, you have muscle aches, you have tension, you have gastrointestinal upset, you have hormonal imbalance. So
all that can be triggered by something in your mind.
Yes.
Well, it's just like Chinese medicine. They often relate, like if you're having pancreas issues, then you look and it's like, this is the emotion tied to it. And it's crazy because, obviously I believe in God completely, and that he is healer and everything. I think though the science that is, he created everything. And so all that science just shows how amazing in his glory and how intricately we are made. But it's crazy to think, like, I'll go and I'll Google that, like, what is related to this or whatever, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the emotions I've been struggling with.
Absolutely.
And it's like, help me with my eczema, Dr. Shiloh.
Yes, I can do that.
No, I feel like this is like, you're so multifaceted that there's probably equal or even more women out there in the group that are talking about their mental health and finding therapists and finding therapists. So it's just nice to know somebody that has the faith background, because that's a very big thing for Samantha and I, to be able to, when people post that or ask for that, to have you as a reference now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very passionate about it because of the health journey that I had. If I hadn't had such a strong faith, I would not have survived. my health issues. I just know that is the absolute thing that pulled me through, because at a certain point you run out of ways to make it make sense.
Right.
And only God is going to see you through.
And only God can bring laughter during that time, like you
Yes.
said, which again, it
Yes.
makes no sense.
Yes. So now I have a lot of resilience because I've been through that. It makes me able to help other people in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do before. And I look at my life now and think, this is exactly where I was meant to be. I don't know what I was thinking going into banking. That was not my plan. That was not my path. So I'm very glad that I've had this redirection in life. I don't look at it as that was the worst thing ever. I look at it was a huge blessing, because I wouldn't have been able to do so many of the things that I've done since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's amazing.
So are you related to David Thompson?
David Thompson is my dad.
So we've been giving your mom Virginia baths.
That's
but
my grandma.
before, or your
Oh,
grandma. I
grandma.
mean your grandma. That's what I meant, not your
Yes.
mom. But yeah,
We
before
have our accounts
she
at
broke her
People's
hip.
Bank. That's
Yeah.
where
Yes.
our business accounts
And
are
I
just
went
set
to
up.
Guatemala with your dad, and
Yes.
he's the one that I told you.
Yes.
So we just
Yeah.
shared a story about it. But when we first went, I was like, I get on your nerves, don't I? And he didn't say anything. I was like, we're gonna be best friends by the end of this. And then at the end of it, he grabbed me and he's like, all right, kid, I've grown to really love you.
Yeah. The thing you have to know about my dad, if he gives you a hard time, he likes you. If he ignores you, he doesn't like you at all.
Well, he's giving me all kinds of, it's like, I'm like, the whole time I told my husband, I was like, he does not like me. I was like, I'm going to make him my best friend. And then we were like buddies at the end of the trip.
So yes, David
Yeah.
and Peggy Thompson are my parents. Donald and Virginia are my grandparents. And
We love Virginia
we were
so much.
raised to give back to the community. It was my grandparents were really big on that, and then
Kind of like a loyalty play.
yeah.
Really.
Well, there's the saying, it takes a village, and the reason I think that resonates and has stayed a concept for so long is because, yes, I was raised by my parents, but I can also tell you I had spiritual moms from church that helped, and great teachers along the way that helped, and just a good community network that if I ever had an issue, I knew I could go to and count on them to be there. And so I really believe that you give back to that, because that's how the cycle keeps going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. And I know you've hinted to a few other things within your story, and I don't know if you want to go into anything else before, just getting on the topic of ADHD. And you don't have to. It's just incredible, actually, all the things you've gone through and where you're at today. And again, it really warms my heart of how God connects people with us too. And even like when people were engaging with you, commenting on Samantha's post and everything, I was like scrolling through. I was like, is she a believer? I love her answers, but I hope that she has that component too. And I found that you did as well. So before jumping into the topic of ADHD, because it seems like we could talk about so many different things, is there anything else that you would want to share?
So I don't know if you are really familiar, but as psychotherapists, we're taught not to talk about ourselves. So talking about myself is really uncomfortable, but I'm learning how to do that. I did grow up in Troy. I have 5 kids.
Wow.
4 boys and 1 girl, and I have one child, a daughter, who's waiting for me when I get to go to heaven, and I know that I'll meet her then.
We were just talking about that, and just going through the grief of that is an incredibly awful, hard, like you said, a lifelong thing too. So she's got so many things in her, in her experience that I just feel like the best people that can relate and help others are those that have been there, done that.
I think we go through hard times because God is going to use that, whether he uses it for us or whether he uses it to better other people. And it's not our job to decide if it's for us
you
or
would
if
never
it's for
have
someone else.
accepted, right?
Right.
You just wouldn't have.
Because I wasn't going to sign up to have a brain tumor, and I wasn't going to sign up to have my daughter die at birth. But I've been able to help people since then. And one of my favorite things to do is now I am at the place where I can offer pro bono therapy for grieving mothers. And I frequently do that because it's just, I know that it meant a lot to me. So it blesses me to be able to give back in that way. But I do have 5 kids, and a couple of them have ADHD. One of them is also on the autism spectrum. So that is something that I'm passionate about as well, and helping them navigate life with medication and without medication. We've done both. So as an integrative medicine provider, the thing that I like to tell people is I'm not against prescription medications. Obviously, I wouldn't still be here if we didn't have medicine that was able to do that. But I also think that we have so many tools like Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and medicine that has been used for centuries, that when newer medicine came around, we tended to just kind of forget that medicine existed. And it was working, and it had worked for a long time. Yes. And so I think there's room for both. And so that's from our practice, that's how we operate. And so, yeah, a lot of it is things that I've picked up along the way that I've used with my children, or things that I've used with myself that I know works. In addition to all the college degrees, I have a little bit of an addiction to learning. I have all these letters behind my name, and my daughter calls it alphabet soup because I have like 27 additional certifications beyond my degrees. At one point, she threatened to cut me off from my Amazon account because I wouldn't stop buying books and learning more things.
It's a beautiful thing. You're an intellect.
I would say, of all the addictions to have, learning is probably a okay one.
Can I ask you before walking in the ADHD thing, is there one of those things, or Chinese medicine, is there anything that stood out to you the most of like, maybe gave you the greatest wealth of knowledge or epiphanies?
It's really hard to say that there's one in particular. What I do believe is that we should have a broad spectrum of knowledge, like a toolbox that we can draw from, because not everything is a hammer situation. Sometimes we need a screwdriver, or sometimes we need pliers. So the more tools that we acquire, the more knowledge that we acquire, the better we are equipped to handle multiple situations. And I think every situation should be approached on an individual basis because God made us all different. So I don't think that we should go, this is how we fix this and this is the protocol for this, because what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the next person. We all have a different DNA. We all have a different genetic code. And I think we have to honor that. So my approach is usually very tailored specifically to each person. But one of my additional certifications is specialized around ADHD and autism spectrum. So I did spend quite a lot of time. It was about an 18-month certification getting extra information and knowledge about that. Okay, so ADHD and autism are what we call neurodivergent disorders. I don't like the term disorder because that implies that something is wrong. But someone somewhere along the way decided there is a neuronormative brain and then there is a neurodivergent brain, meaning simply your brain is different. It develops differently than what they consider a traditional brain.
And that's only based off of behavioral for the most part, or no?
No, it's not.
Okay,
there's an actual physical difference in the development of the brain. So it's really important to note they're not mental health disorders, because this isn't something that's a chemically induced issue. This is something that it's that actual physical development difference in the way a neurodivergent brain grows versus a non-neurodivergent brain. So usually what we see with somebody who has a neurodivergent brain, I prefer to think of it as neurospicy, because I think these people are amazing and they just add flavor and zest to the world for the rest of us. But these people usually have a overly developed sense of emotion in the back of their head, where their hypothalamus and their amygdala exist. That part of the brain tends to develop faster, and the creative areas on the sides of the brain develop faster than the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that controls executive functioning. So it's the decision-making part of your brain. It decides this is important, this is not important, this is a good decision, this is a bad decision. All of that happens in the prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain is the slowest part to develop in a neurodivergent brain.
And what is causing them to be neurodivergent? Genes sometimes environment?
They don't know.
Okay.
They don't know. There has not been a definitive study that says there's a gene that causes this, or there is a trauma or a pesticide. Mm-hmm. We don't think it's trauma related, really. But the key thing that I think people need to understand is that this isn't something that you outgrow. This is something that this is the way God made you. This is the way your brain works. And you have to learn how to work with it instead of trying to fight it. Mm-hmm. There's not a cure for it. It doesn't need a cure because it's not you being broken. I like to tell people, especially people who have ADHD, to think of a neuronormative brain as a Ford Focus. Mm-hmm. It's a very stable, reliable car that goes at like 1 speed. Neurospicy people, ADHD people, their brains are like a Lamborghini. They move through life much faster. And so we have to give them different fuel than we would give a Ford Focus for their engines to work properly. So I don't see it as a disability or a disorder. I see it as a superpower. People who have ADHD have the ability to be so creative and see things big picture that neuronormative people sometimes have a hard time seeing. So that's how I explain it to people. And then autistic brains are very much the same, but they tend to have a spectrum. So you can have people with autism who are almost nonverbal, who communicate in other ways beyond using language. And then we have other people who are on the high functioning end of the spectrum, what we used to call Asperger's, who are so smart that it's hard to keep up with their train of thought, and they tend to hyper focus on certain aspects. So yeah, it doesn't mean that they're broken. It means that's the way that they were designed to be, and that their job in life is just different than what a neuronormative forward-focused brain is supposed to do.
I like that explanation.
Yeah.
It's very good.
So especially with kids, letting them know that they're not broken, that yes, they are different than some of their classmates and their peers, but it doesn't mean that they're bad. It doesn't mean that they're broken. It means that they're different and they're special. And then teaching them tools to learn how to live life with it rather than fight against it. Right? So things like behavioral tools, like when I should probably say that ADHD is more than just one thing. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and there are 3 categories to that. So there is the inattentive subtype, which actually means that they're paying attention to too many things at the same time. So it's like having 50 browser tabs open in your brain at the same time and jumping from one thing to another all day long. That's the inattentive subtype. We tend to see this subtype more frequently in girls and women, and it goes underdiagnosed because they don't have as extreme of behavioral issues. They can be very good at school, and so it goes under the radar for a longer period of time. But it just means that they have learned how to cope and adapt. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist for them. Then we have the hyperactive subtype. That's the type that gets diagnosed more frequently with boys, earlier in school, because they don't want to sit still in class. They usually describe it as they're being driven by a motor and that they cannot sit still. They're the ones who are climbing the furniture, poking their classmates, getting in trouble for not staying in line or pushing or not staying on task and just moving around all the time. It's easier to identify that when they're young because they're not hitting those normative things of follow directions, stay on task, stay in line, don't touch your neighbor.
Teachers sending home reports.
Yes. So then people are like saying something because their behavioral issues are actually causing them to struggle with social interaction. So for that one, we have to really work on teaching them how to modify some of those behaviors. There's some really great tools for that. And then we also can make adjustments to the classroom as to, hey, we've got this kid, here's an IEP or a 504 plan, allowing them to have extra time on tests, allowing them to have noise canceling headphones, stretchy bands attached to their desks so that they can fidget without hitting their neighbor. Tools like that can be used as intervention to help them get through school. Then the third type is a mixed presentation. So that presentation is where you get fun qualities of both the inattentive and the hyperactive subtype. And those kids and adults can grow up to be amazing CEOs of companies,
right,
because
them being a very good workhorse.
They have energy out the wazoo, and they can multitask in ways that normative brains cannot. But they can also struggle just with social interaction because it's hard to keep up with their train of thought. It's hard to like watch them jump from one thing to another, because for somebody who doesn't have that struggle, they see it as this person has no focus. And that's not true. They're focused on many, many things with equal value across the board.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I know everything is like tailored to the specific person, but are there a few things that across the board, all those 3 subtypes, that is just like a first go-to, or something a mother listening today can start with, or a supplement or an activity that it could hit home and potentially help any of them out there?
Yes. Okay. So basic things that I would recommend to anybody who is either struggling with it or has a child that they're wanting to help is get them on a good quality omega-3 supplement, because that is going to act as the good gasoline for that Lamborghini brain. When we're talking about, they use different fuel. Their brain needs it. It burns through it faster than a normative brain would. And there's no way you're going to be able to give it to them by feeding them enough salmon. So you're going to, by all means, feed them salmon. I mean, feed it to them daily. If they'll eat it, yes, but you're going to still need that supplement because their brain is burning that fuel so rapidly. The second thing I would say.
Do you have a favorite type of omega-3 or brand? I
do. I recommend, there are 2 that I will recommend. One comes from doTERRA. The reason I recommend that is because I can see where all of it is sourced, and I can also see every tests that they run on it to make sure it is pure and unadulterated. And they will not put it out if it is not within 3% of the same exact dosage every single time. And so if I'm going to recommend something, I want to make sure that they're going to get the same results with every bottle, not just this one's okay and we're going to throw it against the wall and hope it sticks, right? The other one I like is Nordic Naturals. I would say make sure that you're getting it from a good supplement source, like an integrative medicine provider or a functional medicine doctor, rather than ordering it off Amazon, because the supplements that go through Amazon sit in a warehouse that is not climate controlled for
Probably rancid.
indefinite amounts of time, and it does go bad. It does dilute the potency and it goes rancid and can actually make you quite ill. So I prefer getting supplements direct from the manufacturer whenever possible. I use an online pharmacy called Full Script, and so you can go to Full Script and it'll send it straight to you from Nordic Naturals itself. doTERRA, the same. It comes direct from the source. So those are the two that I recommend. The second thing I would recommend is look at changing diet. So spicy brains really need a lot of protein because their brain has a tendency to experience more inflammation than a regular brain does because it's working so hard.
Do you see them craving more like sugary food? Is there something that they crave more than other brains?
They tend to, especially as children, crave sugar, and that's usually because they are crashing blood sugar wise, and they're craving that dopamine response from it. Because we all know when you eat a carbohydrate, it turns to sugar. It gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling of comfort food like mashed potatoes or mac and cheese. That's the dopamine response coming. And so they tend to crave that. So I recommend giving them a good, solid protein source, especially early in the day. Give them as many eggs as you can get down them. Like if they are willing to eat eggs, that's what you want them to have. It's like a super food for their brain. But it also sets them up, it burns slower metabolism wise. So it sets them up to stay fuller longer, have better focus, things like that. It's also going to keep the blood sugar more stable. And when we do that, then their emotions stay more stable.
We were talking about my cousin is into balancing hormones naturally from Michigan. And her number one thing is, other than magnesium, is balanced blood sugars. And when we do it, even near my period, premenopausal, I'm so much more friendly and less moody and all of that. Yeah. So I've seen such an impact that I know that works.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So lean into protein as much as possible. I also recommend taking out anything that we know to be a strong inflammatory response when it comes to food. Things like gluten and dairy have a strong inflammation factor. Also, sugar. Sugar is probably, if I were ranking them in order, I would go gluten and sugar and then dairy and then corn.
Interesting.
So those are the big inflammation ones that I would suggest limiting, if not removing completely.
And it's okay to start somewhere, right? I think some people might be like, pause. I don't know. It's just overwhelming. Like do something. No, like just start with protein. Just do the protein.
Just pick one, right. And then you can see how that goes and maybe add something else a little ways down the road. You don't have to do all of it at once. This is just, I'm giving you a broad spectrum of things.
But think about if you're planning as a mom and you're in control of their breakfast, you can pack them a lunch for school. Those 2 meals, say you did the gluten and the dairy and you save that for dinner, so be it. I mean, there are tricks that you could do that could make it potential.
There are a couple of other things that I would probably suggest. So we've talked about behavioral things they can do at school. We've talked about diet. We've talked about a few, like a couple supplement ideas. There are some other supplements that I would use before jumping into a medication. things like L-theanine. L-theanine is really good for helping with focus and calm. So it acts as a mood stabilizer. It helps their brain stay on target, stay on task. And when you combine L-theanine with caffeine, which I think we sometimes forget as we drink our coffee.
Without sugar.
Yeah, we sometimes
Speak for
forget
yourself.
that caffeine is a drug. It's just a legal drug that we give ourselves, right? But if you give somebody with ADHD caffeine in conjunction with L-theanine, it boosts their focus level tremendously.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Why don't they talk about that? Isn't that?
Well, because they don't make money off of it. So the thing with the pharmaceutical industry with medications specifically for ADHD is they're usually all meth-based. So they're usually all stimulant-based. And what you see with that is like caffeine is a legal addictive stimulant that we can do without having to jump into something that is meth-based in order to do that. So ADHD brains actually have a reverse effect with caffeine to a normal brain. So where a normal brain, you take caffeine to wake you up and keep you going, ADHD brains, it levels them out and slows their processing down a little bit. So
is this recommended before, like only in the mornings? I know caffeine late in the day, or is there a
for an
time
ADHD brain? It's not going to keep them awake. Okay. So anytime you need them to focus, give them a little bit of caffeine, like 20 minutes beforehand, and they're good to go.
That's amazing.
Now, for a neuronormative brain, if you drink caffeine after 2 p.m., you're probably going to have trouble falling asleep at night. Right. So that's something that I would definitely take into consideration. And then sometimes what we see with ADHD is if they are on a medication, say you've tried everything under the sun and you have to go to a stimulant medication because their behavior is just causing so much problem for them. That's okay, but there are a couple things you need to look out for. One, you still need to be teaching them behavioral cues to recognize when their behavior is a problem for the people around them. Two, you need to watch out for the stimulant medication zaps their appetite. So kiddos who are on stimulant medication tend to be underweight and malnourished because they don't eat because they no longer feel hungry. So you're going to see that they're going to have trouble making weight, having good muscle mass. So again, you're going to need to lean heavy into protein to combat that. The third thing about that is when they go on stimulant medication as children, it is the new norm in the medical establishment to take stimulant medication away when they become an adult because it's being misused so frequently. So you're going to have a kid who gets dependent upon that medication, and then they're going to turn 18 and their doctor's going to say, you can't have this anymore. And then they're going to have to make a choice of, do I go to an antipsychotic medication or do I try and cold turkey and go to something else? And that can be a serious like withdrawal problem for them. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's necessary and you can't do anything about it, but know that you're biochemically altering them. So it's going to be a process if you decide to come off it. So what else can I say?
Anything with routines or anything else? Like the mom, again, listening today can
So let's talk about some like parenting tips, right, for ADHD. Kids with ADHD need structure. They need so much structure. You cannot give them enough structure. They're not going to tell you that they want structure, but their brain craves structure. They like routine. So things as simple as backpacks and shoes go in the same place every time they come in the door so that they can't go, I can't find my backpack, because they have a specific place for it. Limiting screen time after a certain time of night. Their brains are so full because they're looking at it from so many different angles, trying to get so much information in a day. at the end of the day, their brain has to drain out and decide, this is important, I want to keep it. This is not important. And there's only one way for it to get out. That's like the kitchen sink. They have one hole where everything drains at the end of the day. You have to give them time to empty that out, or they're never going to be able to go to sleep at night. They're going to lay in bed and they're just going to spiral and go thought after thought after thought, replaying everything in the day. So limit screen time, because the light from the screens actually tells the brains to wake up and engage. We did studies a few years back with fMRI scans that showed kids who have TVs in their bedrooms had symptoms of ADHD from the light of the screen. If they took those TVs out of the bedrooms for 1 month, you put those same kids in the scan, they no longer had the symptoms of ADHD. Wow. So sometimes what we're seeing is it's not a neurodevelopmental problem. Sometimes it's environmentally induced. Wow. Because we're introducing screens into the world.
Do you have a rule of thumb you advise parents, like no more than this amount of video games or screen time and like within 2 hours of bedtime? Is there like a guidelines that you follow?
At least 1 hour before bed, no screens. And that should be for adults,
and
children.
That's TV across the room, or
TV
like your
across
iPad.
the room, phones, iPads, all of it. Limit screens. Give your brain
so
a break.
It is hard.
Not for the kids, but for me.
Adults too. I know. Yeah, absolutely. But I recommend that universally for ADHD, but also for just brain health in general. Yeah. We've gotten to the point where we start looking at our screens before we ever get out of bed in the morning.
No, it's so bad.
And we don't give our bodies and brains time to like boot up and process out at the end of the day. And we're doing ourselves a disservice. Then we wonder why we have insomnia and we can't get our thoughts to stop spiraling, and we're waking up at 2 a.m. thinking about things.
Are you speaking to us? Are you seeing inside our
Not
souls?
me. Never. No,
Right.
I don't struggle with the morning part at all. Actually, I don't really want my phone. But the evening, like watching a show or like, just like winding down, finally getting to sit, and you just want to like.
Yeah. Well, I'm nerdy. I already admitted that I like to study.
You're just reading books.
I just read books.
I love to read books. I
My
do
pile's
love to
over
read
there.
books, but like with your husband, I mean
Finding
I guess we could be like, stay on this page.
With
Flip.
your husband, you could be having sex instead.
I mean, that happens too.
That's good. That's fine. It's biblical.
Yeah, we're married.
We talk about that. We did that
Yeah.
a couple podcasts ago. Like, don't forget, ladies, with struggling marriages,
right.
if you're not doing that,
If he's a
very
little
cute.
grumpy,
Yeah.
or if you're a little
you
grumpy.
feel disconnected. We have a
Absolutely.
remedy.
Hormonally, you actually need to have sex. Right? To
My
burst your
husband's
bubble,
going,
but it
I
actually,
knew
you
it.
get
I've
a
been
re-
telling you this the whole time.
You get a release of
Yeah.
hormones that actually helps fight dementia and
No way.
breast cancer and other cancers
Wow.
when you have sex.
There's
so much that
crazy
we don't know,
research.
right?
Like
Yeah.
we went down the rabbit hole, and then it's just like mind blowing, like all the stuff. And then like looking like in your partner's eyes while you're married, and it like creates different things in your brain. And I can't remember now what it was, but it was really cool.
Yeah.
It was a great
Absolutely.
article.
Yeah,
But-
that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
We can
Anyway.
get way down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole.
Okay, so you said the TV was at the last. I know we went on that
Parenting,
tangent.
like
Parenting.
When you have a kid who is neurodivergent, whether autism or ADHD, don't ask them to do more than one thing at a time.
So get your shoes and then brush your teeth. And
yeah,
then,
don't go get your shoes, your backpack, and find your sister. And don't do that, because they will not remember. And then you're just going to get frustrated because you think that they're not listening. They're listening, but their brain is already thinking about what's going to happen 3 hours down the road. Only ask them to do one task at a time, and then come back to you when they're done. And make sure they're looking at you when you tell them. Now, don't get offended if your neurodivergent kid doesn't look you in the eye. They're not being dishonest. They're not being shifty. Eye contact with neurospicy people is really uncomfortable. And so they don't like that.
Interesting.
That doesn't mean that they're lying to you, because I was raised to think you look people in the eye, because if you don't, then you're, showing them that you're not interested or that you're lying. With neurospicy people, that's not the case.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So those are some other tips that I would throw out there.
Well, for the sake of time, I think we could go on all day long. How does somebody out there, like even a parent of a child with ADHD, or maybe you are an adult with it, or we talked a little bit about struggling with mental health. If you are a member of Lincoln County, how does somebody get in touch with you?
So you can contact me through my office, which is Integrative Connections Counseling Wellness Center. We have a website at integrate2connect.com with the number 2. You can also follow us on socials at Integrate to Connect. You can also get information from me in particular about lots of different mental health issues at Dr. Shiloh Speaks on Instagram, also on Pinterest. I have a website, Dr. Shiloh Speaks, that has a lot of free resources. So take full advantage of that. I also have a community that's called the Boss Mommas community. The Boss Mommas community is basically, they get access to everything that I have ever created in regard to mental health. And we have a support group there where they can come in with questions and they'll get answers from me. Designed it for women who are busy and active, and they need that mental health support and they need the community support, but they don't necessarily have the budget to come see me in the office every time, because that can add up really quickly. So it's a lower cost way for them to get access to me, but also get access to my entire library of everything, that all those tools, right? Like I said in the beginning, we have got this toolbox, and then they can pull out what they need when they need it and support each other as well.
That's incredible.
Amazing.
I don't know how you keep it all together, but
I might be a little neurospicy myself.
Same. I was late.
let the cat out of the bag. Oh, well, this is very phenomenal. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot of wisdom from it. Even your top tips, I just are so practical and honestly can't hurt anybody. It doesn't sound like, except maybe the caffeine. But it's just phenomenal. I think maybe if you're up to in the future doing maybe even a live, we have women that listen to the podcast. We do little promos out there in the community, but a lot of them still miss it. So maybe that could be another way. Again, we have a big audience in Lincoln County to spread awareness. Again, we have the same heart as you do. We just want to help hurting women. We being hurting women ourselves in our past. So we have kindred hearts for women. So anyways, we're just very appreciative that you said yes. And we're so excited that you came.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to come back and do anything you guys need. I just want to give the tools to people so that they know where to go when they have issues and don't feel lost, because that I can't think of anything worse to feel lost when crisis comes.
Right.
Yeah, that's so good. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
What are you having for dinner tonight?
I am having steak.
Yum.
Dang it. Come on.
Yes.
I thought
That
you
sounds really
should be
good.
unprepared for something. Be like, I don't know. We're just going to...
Nope. I have a ribeye that is thawing at home right now that I will be having for dinner.
That
That
sounds
sounds
amazing.
so
Go
good.
big or go home. Well, I'm not going to say what I'm having now.
Well, do it. You have to.
Frozen chicken, probably, and something with rice, maybe. The brown rice that has 3 grams of protein.
Yeah.
Like the short, fat rice. Not corn tonight.
I'm doing
you?
wraps.
She has a culinary degree. I don't know how much you know about her, but so her food is always amazing.
Amazing.
So.
I do like to cook, but it doesn't mean it's always amazing, especially as mom life. Like, you don't get to cook like what you want. It's like,
Sometimes,
what can I cook on my budget that my kids will also
In
not
7
complain?
minutes, 'cause we
Yeah,
gotta
like
get to
in
baseball.
7
Yeah.
minutes to make all the games. But I actually made a dinner yesterday, and then we ended up going to my mom's, so I have it already made. So just some ground sausage. I'm doing wraps with them. Like, I have like carrot sticks and celery, and then arugula and cheese, and I don't know.
Sounds amazing.
Lovely.
Easy peasy.
Sorry,
no
Eric,
cleanup.
if you're listening.
Whatever.
You can't be good at everything.
or most things. Anything feminine, I'm not good at.
That's not true.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Oh, it's funny. You know, like decorating, like she helped, you know, that's her thing. Cooking is her thing. I'm starting to get advice for planting things better, even like inside the house. Usually I'm like, if it's not practical, it's not coming in. But I'm like, well, it is kind of nice and it's good for the air if you have plants in your house. So I was like, what are you using fertilizer?
I forgot your water meter.
Oh.
I bought it.
But that's why women need community, even like this. Like we need to get together. We need to learn from each other. We need to be able to point people in the right direction, utilize our resources, and magnify God through this, you know, because
absolutely.
It's not all about what we get from it. It's what we can give and how that we can look back in our life and see the hardships turn into such beautiful things.
So good. Yeah, your podcast is amazing. I feel like I could ask you a billion questions and keep going.
I feel like you're like trained on podcasts and I'm sitting here like, what do I say? I don't know. You're just like,
that's the educator coming out. Because
well, you speak a lot
so
too.
Yes,
yeah, I mean,
am a public
you
speaker,
can tell.
So,
yeah,
yeah,
it just flows.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Incredible.
I got over my fear of that a long time ago.
See you next time, mamas.
Yay! You're phenomenal.
Yes,
what is
so
your
good.
tip on like keeping like balance? I want to say balance, which is no such thing. I know
Work-life
it's so
balance.
overused.
Yeah.
But, like how to maintain and like, do you wake up early? Are you like one of those?
I am a 5 a.m. girl.
Yep. See.
Not because I love it. I hate it. I do. I hate it. But I have learned that I can get so much more done when the house is not running.
Yeah.